Start in a moment. I'm here. Let's see how we can share this. Okay, good afternoon and welcome everybody today to Lunch Break with the Rabbi. Today we're going to be continuing our conversation, learning and exploring the Rebbe's ideas and outlook on the world, as tonight is the yard site, it's the 3rd of Tammuz. I encourage you all to join us in today's special program tonight at 8:30 p.m. You can see it at jewishally.com/virtual about learning and listening from the Rebbe. As well as tomorrow, there's a day for the Rebbe that throughout the day, different classes that one can tune in to listen about the Rebbe. Today, we're going to continue of discussing of how this world, yesterday we began talking about the world, how the Rebbe viewed the world as a garden, teaching us the opportunities that though the world may have in it a mixture of different kinds of things, we have to look for the fruit and not focus on the weeds. Today, we take it even a step further. There were many people that asked the Rebbe the following question. How is it possible for one to say that the world is full of a blissful, beautiful place, while the human being, by definition, is selfish, materialistic, and egotistic, and so many other negative attributes which are seemingly within the inclination of the human being, what we call the evil inclination. We have the evil inclination. The evil inclination causes us to behave certain ways. And how can we say that that inherently is good? And the Rebbe addressed this question by a Fabringen, and the Rebbe explained as follows: that it says in the first day of, it says by God created the world on the 6th day of creation, Vehine toiv miyoid, and behold, the world was very good. And the Talmud says, what does it mean, very good? Very good means the evil inclination. Now, the question you may wonder, how is it possible to call the evil inclination very good? We know the evil inclination is anything but good. It's the antithesis of good. And the Medrash addresses this question. And the Medrash says that what it means by very good is that it's the impetus to do good, meaning that the very fact that we're challenged and we're able to see the contrast between bad and good, it teaches us what good is meant to be and how we're supposed to behave. But the Rebbe doesn't suffice with this answer. And he takes it even a step further. He says the very fact that the Medrash uses the terminology, and it is very good, means to tell us that the thing itself is good, not only an impetus for good. And the question then becomes, how is it possible to say that the evil inclination is very good? And over here, we have to take it from a whole new perspective, which is as we look into the world and we understand why God created the universe. The first Chabad Rebbe writes in Tanya, in chapter 36, that the purpose of creation was that God should make this world a dwelling place, that we should make this world a dwelling place for God. That means the entire purpose of creation is because God had a craving for some unbeknown reasons, for some infinite reason, is that this physical low world should be a dwelling place for God. Now, what does it mean, this physical world? Not a world of holiness, not a world of sacredness, of selflessness. He wanted to take a world of selfishness, of egotism, of materialism, and make that a spiritual world, make that something holy. That's what the Rebbe was, that's what the Torah wants, and that's what God wanted when he created us in this world. So what God is telling us here is that what did God desire? He desired a world, a place of holiness. We're in the place where seemingly unholy, what something is the antithesis to holiness. So when we look at it, the evil inclination is, so to speak, the being who God wanted we should make holy. Those negative attitudes that are seemingly coming from the evil inclination, what God is telling us, make that holy. And over here is where the Rebbe changed the entire paradigm. We view the world as all the negative that exists in the world as subtypes, subchannels, impetus. The Rebbe said no. Every single thing you see in the world has to be used for holiness. Every single thing that God created is there for the purpose to make it holy. And if you haven't used it to make it holy, then you're missing the point. So even if there's, let's say, egotism, egotism is terrible. Use your ego to be able to channel that strength to do something that somebody else wouldn't be able to do in a way of holiness. Use that, whatever quality seemingly is negative, make it into something holy. Utilize it for something holy. Because every single thing in this world has a holy objective to it. Yesterday we explained about the concept of the peel and the fruit. That you say the world is, look at the fruit, don't focus on the peel. Over here the Rebbe takes it a step further and says the peel itself has a purpose too. The peel itself is holy. The very fact that it's protecting the fruit. Evil itself can be changed and can be utilized and can be used for something holy. Take, for example, what the Rebbe did. Social media, internet, television, in times when people decried it of something, something which is terrible, what did the Rebbe say? Instead of using the television to show channels of impurity and filth, take that same channel and put some holiness, put some Torah on it. Instead of using the computer with getting a click to all different nonsense in the world, use that one click and you have a mass volumes and volumes of teachings of Torah that you can access with one click. The same medium that can be used, which is seemingly unholy, make it holy. That's our job. That's what we would call the archaeological dig that the Torah tells us. That the Rebbe showed us and said, we can take the world, we can take the evil inclination, which is seemingly unholy, and make it holy. But then there's even a step further. That's all in theory. But what happens when it comes to the practical and personal challenges? What happens when we're faced with a difficult dilemma? A challenge, which we are being thrown upon from all different sides, mud. How do we deal with it? So let's go back to our forefather Jacob. Jacob, the patriarch of the Jewish people. It says that while Jacob was working for Lavan, he sang a song to God. And you may ask, what's he singing a song to God in the most difficult of all times? Lavan, who cheated him once, cheated him twice. He uses a terminology that while he was by Lavan, he couldn't sleep, he couldn't eat. It was a terrible time, seemingly. But he's singing. Why was he singing? And the Rebbe explains, because Jacob, even though at the moment he came as a pauper, all he owned was a stick. He knew that every single day and every single hour that he is working by Uncle Laban was in order that he should achieve to bring about the future of the Jewish people. The great wealth that he had eventually was only because he put it in right now, that effort. So even while he was working hard, he was already singing because he saw the fruits of his labor. He knew the eventual profit that would come from it. He saw his challenge not as an obstacle, but as a stepping stone. He saw his challenge as an opportunity. He saw his challenge as a door. And even during the difficulties of the challenge, he was already expressing his hope and his wishes, how he was able to utilize it and sing to God. This is another step of seeing the difficulties, the challenges, the evil, if you may say, and utilizing it for something which is of greater holiness, because you see the eventual repercussion, you see the eventual episode, how it evolves, and you see, so to speak, the end of the book, even while you're opening the book, and you're able to appreciate it to the greatest extent. But then there even comes to a more difficult time. A time that we've just gone through and going through, challenging time, a sad time, difficult times, seemingly bad. How do we make sense of those? How do we deal with those? Or if we live in the positive, is that, so to speak, living in a bliss and ignorance and not addressing the ideas? Are we avoiding and just trying to tune out from what's really happening around us? There was a reporter, a New York Times reporter, his name was Ari Goldman, once came to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe told him that the newspaper predominantly talks about negative news. He should look to write good news in the newspaper. And Mr. Goldman continues that was his guiding light whenever he would write an article, is also to find a positive twist, to also write something good. When we look around us, everything in this world, from the biggest tragedy to the biggest celebration, you can find the good and the not so good. And the question is, what do you focus on? And many times when people wrote to the Rebbe about predicaments and prognoses and all different things, the Rebbe didn't shy away from the concept of saying you need to go to a doctor, you have to get the help that you need and everything else. That's all good and true. But the more importantly is, what is your attitude towards it? When a person's not well, God forbid, or when a person's in a dire predicament, God forbid, are they giving up and saying, forget it, it's all over? Or they deal with their issue, but they have the faith, the resolve, the resilience, and the appreciation for looking forward for something better. This was the difference of how the Rebbe viewed the world and what he helped us understand in our viewpoint. It's not that he was not aware of what was going on. On the contrary, he was very well aware and very in tune. But at the same time, he said, is don't allow the situation to determine your faith in God. As the Rebbe talks about the difference between Adam and the people of our generation. He says Adam was an ingrate. He had everything for him, but he still wasn't happy. We have people today who are suffering, but every single day they wake up and thank God that they're up in the morning. It's about how we focus our attention on what we look at. What do we view ourselves at? Where do we look at? Where do we take our time to focus? Are we focusing it on the negative? Are we focusing it on the positive? There was once a rabbi who wrote a letter to the Rebbe, and he said, all my days are just difficult and full of hardships. I can't take it anymore. And the Rebbe then wrote back to him and underlined, all your days? Don't you remember your years, your youth when you studied in yeshiva? Don't you see the days that you helped people while you're a rabbi in your synagogue? It's all a matter of what you focus on. Yes, there are troubling times. Yes, there are. And we're not undermining, God forbid, the difficulty and the suffering that people may have. But we are not allowed to let those things cripple us. And just because we do have to go through a certain type of challenge or difficulty, we shouldn't allow those things to stop us from breathing, from thinking, from being motivated, and being people who can accomplish. Every single one of us in our own way, has our own different challenges of what we have to do. And what we learn from today is that the human evil inclination, just to summarize, presents us with a wonderful opportunity. Its existence allows us on one hand to tame and to channel the positive purposes, making the world a better place and fulfilling the purpose of God's creation. At the same time, we know that we have challenges and they are not a reason for despair, God forbid, but they are opportunities for growth, knowing that God's benevolence and kindness pervades everything in our life, and to see the adversity for what it truly is, an opportunity for a way for us to accomplish even more. And when we come to a concept of pain and suffering, it has to give us the ability to still maintain the positive outlook and focus on the tremendous good that God has given us, and it will help us propel and get us even to greater places. Talking about the qualities, talking about what we have and the abilities. I want to share with you just one story, a short story. There was this student who was in the dynasty of all his father and great-grandfather, grandfather, all like heads of yeshiva, big Torah scholars. But he didn't have the best head, let's say. He wasn't the greatest scholar. Studying came for him difficult. But his family all looked that he was the next in the chain and the line, and he was supposed to be the next one. But he didn't have that same motivation as his father, his grandfather, and great-grandfather. He didn't have that same quality or talent. And he was very depressed because his family expected one thing of him, but he himself didn't feel up to it. And one time he confided in his chavrusa, which is his study mate. And his study mate asked him, did you speak to the head of the yeshiva? They said, yeah, we spoke to him. They said, don't worry, you study, you pray hard. God will give you all the gifts that you need and you'll be okay. But he says, I studied, I prayed. I still don't have that gift. I still don't think I can be that great Torah scholar. So his friend told him, you know what? The Lubavitcher Rebbe, this was in the late 1950s, early 1960s. Why don't you write a letter to the Lubavitcher Rebbe? He says, but I'm not a Chabad Chassid. I have no relationship with the Rebbe. He doesn't know me. He says, so? He answers letters to everybody. You can send him a letter. And he sent a letter to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, outlining exactly this problem. I come from a dynasty of Torah scholars. This one's a head of a yeshiva, this one's a rabbi, this one's a that, and I don't think I have it. I don't have that quality. A few weeks later, he gets a response back from the Rebbe. And the Rebbe's response was candid and clear to this person and said as follows. There is no law in Jewish law that a person has to be a head of a yeshiva, a great Torah scholar. But there is a law brought clearly in the Talmud that every single person has to give it all he's got to serve his Creator and to have a relationship with his Creator with the talents that God has given him or her. Therefore, the Rebbe says, you don't have to be just because this is what your family was and that's what you think they expect of you. You have to give it all you got and be the best person you can be in serving God in your capacity, and you will be successful. Success is not determined what other people think what you should be. It's what your qualities are and how you can reach your greatest potential with the God-given talents that you got. And the Rebbe takes it even a step further. You can sometimes have a scholar who can be the greatest Torah scholar, but he is not yet using his God-given potential, and he does not have that relationship, and he's not successful. Why? Because he hasn't utilized his capacity. He's just winging it by. But you, on the other hand, if you utilize your capacity, you are successful. You have done what God has wants of you, and that's your job. The boy finishes the story today, an older man already. He says, that gave me the energy to be who I am today. I'm not a Torah, I'm not in the yeshiva, but I feel successful, confident, and competent about who I am and what I do. This lesson is so important for every single one of us. We should always strive to be ourselves, not to be somebody else. Especially in these times when we're sitting at home, going out limited, or now it's opening up, whatever it may be. But it's still, there's that wave, that cloud of negativity, that cloud of divisiveness. God is asking us, be the best you can be. To have a relationship with God, it's not to be somebody else. Take a moment today and think about the God-given talent that was given to you. Are you utilizing it to your capability, making this world a better place? Thank you for tuning in. Tomorrow at 1 o'clock, we'll continue about talking about stories and teachings of the Rebbe. Lunch break with the Rabbi at 1 p.m. Have a wonderful day.